See Mr. Bucknam making his way up. Thanks.
I'm Charles Bucknam from Parker. Is Colorado regulating radon in drinking water? Grandview Estates Rural Water Conservation District conducted baseline inorganic analysis based on Colorado groundwater standards for 3 reference wells in the Dawson Aquifer. Limited analysis lists were used by United Water and Sanitation District and Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Authority to monitor impacts from the construction of Chambers Reservoir. Results of the contaminants in the lower Dawson were alarming. 3 reference wells had different mixtures of contaminants. The Denver aquifer sample had no contaminants above the maximum contamination limit. 1 Dawson's reference well exceeded MCLs for radon, radium, gross alpha, and iron, 1 for gross alpha uranium, and total dissolved solids, and 1 for iron. Chesapeake has approved drilling and spacing plan for Section 8, immediately east of our reference wells, includes another 5 aqua monitoring wells. In order to protect our water supply, we request that radioactive elements be included in any groundwater baseline analysis going forward. There's very limited protection for individual wells in the state of Colorado. This is one of the few places where it's regulated, at all. Radon is a silent killer, second behind smoking and causing lung cancer fatalities. The Health and Safety First program must include radon, uranium, radium, a gross alpha in the analyte list for sampling analysis for background characterization before, during, and after oil and gas drilling in the vicinity of potable groundwater wells. When I inquired about having samples processed at the state lab, I was told they no longer have the service of dissolved radon in water. I had to go to commercial laboratories for that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Bucknam. Next, I have, for the record, Mr. Bucknam, we did provide to the commissioners your handout. Next is Abby Palte, P-A-L-T-E.
Director, could I ask a question?
Yes.
While we're waiting for the next speaker, I just wanted to see if we could ask staff at some point to respond to Mr. Bucknam's handout here that apparently radon and other radioactive elements are not ordinarily reflected in our baseline groundwater testing. So at some point during the day, I'd like staff to respond to that.
Yes, staff, I know you're all listening patiently online at your computers. If we could develop an answer to that for Commissioner Boygan and the rest of the commission, that would be great. We can probably take that up a little bit later this morning. Next, Sharon Zamora. Analo, my environmental manager here to speak to the radon question, and then we can move to my report after that. Greg?
Thank you, Jeff, and commissioners, welcome. We're glad to have you seated today. So I did look into the document that was provided regarding radon, and I have a couple of comments on that. So get a little further from that mic. First, it's important to note that although COGCC is an implementing agency for the groundwater quality standards and classifications implemented by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, as they apply to oil and gas, we are not a regulatory agency over all things groundwater and surface water. Radon is a naturally occurring radioactive gas formed from uranium decay. It can seep into water wells from surrounding rocks and then be released or off-gassed as water exits the tap. Radon occurs naturally throughout Colorado, including in bedrock and sedimentary aquifers. For public water supply systems, CDPHE is the regulatory authority, and public water supply operators need to make sure that they are delivering a safe drinking water supply to their customers. For domestic drinking water wells, private wells, the water well owner is responsible for their own water well and water quality. They are essentially their own PWS operator. So the entry of radon gas into aquifers is not documented in Colorado to be associated with oil and gas development. It is, certainly documented to be in many of the aquifers, including the Dawson Aquifer, as mentioned, and shown in the paper that was handed out. The area that is of concern that was expressed is section 7 and 8, if we evaluated correctly, township 6 south, range 66 west. So down in the Parker Cherry Creek watershed area. The Cherry Creek sediments are known to have radon in them as well. And let's see, the Dawson Aquifer is shallower than the Fox Hills Aquifer, which is a very typical aquifer for water wells to be completed in the Denver DJ Basin. And both of those aquifers are separated from Niobrara producing formations by 5,000 to 7,000 feet of solid pure shale. So the commenter asked about including radon and other radioactive elements as part of the baseline sampling. And for those of you who are not aware, we do have an extensive required baseline sampling program throughout for oil and gas drilling statewide in Colorado. And those constituents are not currently on the baseline sampling list because they're not typically associated with oil and gas. They occur naturally in the aquifers. So it doesn't tell us anything regarding oil and gas to find those in the aquifers necessarily. That's all the sort of summary information I have, but I would be happy to take additional questions.
Director, can I just?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So the concern that was expressed is what you just stated. That is that it's not included in baseline water testing. Granted, the COGCC doesn't regulate groundwater, but the whole purpose of baseline testing, of course, is to identify whether there are impacts from oil and gas operations. And you're sort of, I'm perfectly willing to credit your conclusion, which you're assuming, that is that there is no impact from oil and gas on radon release in groundwater. And I'm certain there's lots of scientific evidence to back up that conclusion, but how difficult would it be to add radon and perhaps other radioactive elements to baseline testing just to confirm it?
So, I mean, the data that was provided looks to me essentially like background data, because where these water wells are located, there is a spaced section. Section 8 was spaced in 2011 by Chesapeake for the Niobrara for one well. It was never drilled. The nearest oil and gas well is about 10 miles away. So we are looking at baseline aquifer conditions with the samples that are here, and those levels of radionuclides are high. So, to add it would not be difficult. To update the list and include those constituents, I think it could probably be done for less than $500 a sample. So, that's, if you consider one well, that's, $500. If you consider that you're monitoring or you're sampling 4 wells, before, 1 year after, and 5 years after you complete the well, then, you've taken that $500 and multiplied it that much. So, there's cost consideration there, and however many wells you're drilling and monitoring. So that's the only I'm not the only consideration, but that's certainly, part of the factor. And
Would it be useful to do some sort of a pilot program to test the concept to see whether there is in fact any impact? You're confident there won't be. And then I'm sure that's.
yeah,
true,
I mean, I think that would be very reasonable to look at a pilot project or an area-wide
We're just
plan.
looking for ways to
Yeah.
increase public credibility
Mhm.
in what we're doing. And that seems to me it's a sort of low cost, easy thing to do is to check it out.
Yeah. Certainly over the next year, we will be revisiting all of our rules, and the baseline sampling rules, I think, would be certainly on the table. So that's something, staff can look into, maybe if ways of making that happen. If you wanted to do something in the interim, it could be done through conditions of approval on permits.
I would just suggest that we look at that.
Yep. Thank you, Commissioner Boygan. We'll put that on our agenda with staff, and we'll look at the potential for a pilot program along those lines. Greg, thank you for presenting quickly and pivoting and responding to some of the public comment we received today. At this point, I think we have my report, the director's report, and then a report from the secretary, and then we move into